We are going to bring it home with an absolutely fantastic panel. It's a panel like the others. I've been really excited to just hear what they're going to say. It's a tremendous opportunity to learn, and I know everyone here is going to really have some really important takeaways to address this really important issue of how justice-involved youth and young adults reenter successfully. What are the innovations needed? What are the barriers? And so forth. So what I'm going to do first is introduce Dr. John Mcdonald, who is the framer and moderator for this panel. And he, just by way of background, he's a professor of criminology and sociology currently at the University of Pennsylvania. And Dr. Mcdonald works on a variety of topics in criminology, including the study of crime and violence, race and ethnic disparities in criminal justice, and the effect of public policy responses on crime. A current focus of his work is examining the ways in which policies and programs to changes in the land use of places can actually reduce crime and violence in neighborhoods. So you can tell he's a great fit for today. Please join me in welcoming Dr. John Mcdonald.
All right, thank you very much for having me. I was going to tell everyone to get up and stretch, but since we had a break, I don't have to do that anymore. So today I want to start framing this discussion about pathways and opportunities for justice-involved individuals by talking about the importance of place, programs, and people. 1 in 3 Americans by age 23 have been arrested by the police. In cities like Philadelphia, 1 in 22 adults are under court-ordered probation or parole. Of the people that we know that end up in state prison, their outcomes when they get released are often not as positive as we'd like them to be. For example, close to 50% of individuals released from a state prison recidivate or rearrested within 1 year, and the figure is closer to 75% when you get to the second and third year of release. So coming home from prison often means facing extreme challenges, extreme poverty, homelessness, intermittent work if there's any work, and an easy path back to state prison from arrest or a parole revocation. So crime and the criminal justice system seem like they're everywhere. They're widespread. But it turns out that criminal justice involvement is far more widespread than actually crime is. Turns out in most cities, crime's highly concentrated in a very few small micro areas. Today, earlier, we discussed about the importance of the census tract or the zip code you live in. But I would argue it's more important what block you grew up on, what set of apartments within a housing project you live in. That when we look at the data on crime, what we see is that about 5% of city addresses in most major cities generate 50% of all reported crimes. This is true in Los Angeles. I just actually looked at the data online before coming here. 5% of addresses in Los Angeles last year generated 50% of the crime. So what is it about these places that has such a powerful role in shaping our lives? If you think about it, it's kind of obvious fact that place should be so important. But when we talk about criminal justice, we rarely talk about the important and powerful role of place. So when I think about restoring people's chances, returning citizens, people with criminal justice involvement, we should also think a lot about restoring places when we're trying to restore people. The design of streets and sidewalks of these blocks, the quality of housing on these blocks, the amount of green space, the cleanliness of city streets, these things affect whether we walk, the quality of air we breathe, the stress we feel, and how safe we think we are from crime. So unhealthy blocks with abandoned buildings and rundown lots equal unhealthy lives. More people we know die from gun violence, heart disease, drug overdoses when neighborhoods are overrun by these problems. And it turns out there's an emerging science, some of which I've contributed to, that shows that we can reduce these problems by changing neighborhoods block by block. Clean up vacant lots, people go outside and socialize with each other. And they also have reported less stress. Depression also goes down when you remediate a vacant lot near people's homes. We found in Philadelphia depression rates went down by about 30% by the simple fact of cleaning up a vacant lot. Put new windows and doors on abandoned houses, and gun violence drops by as much as 39%, at least in the city of Philadelphia. So place-based changes we can think about on these blocks, turns out many of them are fairly simple. They're also not that expensive. They're actually affordable. And they can be scaled to entire cities. So if we start by thinking about how we can change the physical environment in the most disadvantaged places, then we can think about how that generates health and safety for everyone living in there. Victims, people involved in crime, the witnesses, opportunities for everyone. It also turns out if we think about remediating places, it's also a good opportunity to provide people with jobs. Semi-skilled jobs that provide often a living wage. So in the case of Philadelphia, where I've been doing a lot of research, we found the group that we've been partnering with, the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society, its program on land care, it focuses specifically on hiring people from the community, many of them with criminal justice involvement, to be engaged in remediating, cleaning vacant lots. And that kind of job pays a living wage. For many of the individuals, this is the first time they've ever had a job that paid $12 an hour, which doesn't sound like a lot of money to many of us in this room, but 40 hours a week, steady pay, and a skill. And the ability to start your own business. I was actually just talking to my 12-year-old the other day, telling him, he is saying his first job he wants is at an ice cream parlor. I said, no. I'm going to buy you a lawnmower, and you're going to start knocking on doors. And I was explaining to him, you can make a lot more money in the weekend mowing lawns than you can sitting in an ice cream parlor, and that's a skill. Nothing wrong with scooping ice cream, but this sense of entrepreneurial spirit that you can build with people by providing them with an opportunity. And today we're going to hear a lot more from these experts about the kinds of programs and opportunities that can be created for justice-involved youth and young adults. But one of the things I'd like to say is that we know that employing individuals in criminal justice involved in semi-skilled work occupations can spur not just higher wages, but can change their life, can transform them from criminal justice involved to a pathway to productive and positive life opportunities. Research, for example, in Chicago and New York City finds that providing adolescents and young adults with paying semi-skilled jobs both reduces serious crime and the chance that participants are going to end up in state prison years later. And this is through a lottery type of study, so we can say that everyone essentially is randomly assigned to this job. So that's the kind of evidence that suggests that this is truly a causal effect of getting a job on reducing someone's chance of criminal justice involvement. And there are many other studies I could go through, but just to, I noticed there was somebody mentioned before that they're from Homeboy Industries, and I think a useful quote from Father Greg Boyle is that nothing stops a bullet like a job. And I think that's something to keep in mind when we're thinking about what we can do in cities. But first and foremost, I want to focus again on this idea that we can repair blight and abandonment in these highest crime places, this kind of chronic stress that people experience. That at some levels maybe is even is connected to our ancestral DNA in terms of what do we like. Think about your experience today. You walked around USC's campus. It was beautiful. They're cleaning it up. You imagine a different situation, a different scenario. What we're exposed to constantly is trash, debris, graffiti, abandoned houses, and the kind of stress that places on people in their daily lives. And so what I want to do next is show you a very short 90-second video that was part of a pitch to the MacArthur Foundation to do this work on scale. We didn't get the money, but it's a nice video to kind of showcase what I'm talking about.
In U.S. cities, over 85,000 people are victims of gun violence every year. More than 10,000 die. How do we change this? We repair urban neighborhoods block by block. We make inexpensive changes proven to have an enormous impact. Clean up vacant lots and gun violence goes down 8%. Put new windows and doors on abandoned homes, and we lower gun violence 39%. Place-based interventions like these are simple and affordable, and they generate a dramatic return on investment.
RTI International and the University of Pennsylvania bring together the scientists who've done this groundbreaking research and a high-level team with decades of experience overseeing large multi-site projects.
Building on past success, we can create thousands more blocks just like this one. We have an ambitious plan to identify willing partners,
engage local stakeholders,
implement simple, sustainable infrastructure fixes,
and evaluate our efforts to ensure long-term self-sufficiency. We have the evidence, we have the expertise, we have the plan.
All we need is your support. Thank you.
All right, so I guess my last task for today is I was supposed to help run a quick poll. So I'd like everyone has to go on their app. How many Americans have a criminal record? Good enough. So obviously a lot more widespread than most of us would realize. Okay, next one. Black men are blank times more likely to be incarcerated than white men. Not quite as bad as maybe most of us thought. All right, so I want to introduce our panelists today. So you're going to get to hear from inspirational group of panelists. One of the things I want to say is kind of introducing these individuals is it's going to be the efforts of policymakers and practitioners who are really engaged in the trenches in terms of doing the hard work to help people coming out of the criminal justice system or with current criminal justice involvement. And so we need good models out there, good innovation models. We need them to spread around the country. And I feel like right now we're at a crossroads in the country where there's a real appetite for change. So I wouldn't say it's a finish line, but it's a starting line. I'm optimistic. As a criminologist, I spent the last 20 years reading a lot of negative research and a lot of negative policy on what you can do to make things better, and I feel like the tide's changed. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation we're going to have today and your questions. So to start us off, I'm going to introduce Beverly Parenti, who's the executive director of The Last Mile, and she's a social entrepreneur. I won't reveal all the things that Last Mile does, but it's quite an amazing program. It started off in San Quentin prison, and they teach individuals in state prisons how to write computer code. This is the kind of, I think, job opportunities that can be inspirational in terms of we think about criminal justice reform. So Beverly will be our panelist. We're also going to have Shanae Polk, who's a program director at Second Call. Shanae's work involves community-based organization designed to assist people with personal development of high-risk individuals. Shanae herself was sentenced to prison. By the time she earned parole, though, she had taken a prison of Peace of California Institution for Women. She was a lead trainer on that. She earned a college degree. She became a licensed substance abuse counselor, and she's been a dedicated community advocate since then. And one kind of side note I'll point out is a recent book by Pat Sharkey points out the kind of unknown but powerful role that nonprofits like Second Call have had in actually reducing violence in American cities. Often the discussion we've had is what's the cause of this amazing reduction in violence, and I think what's been overlooked is the role of nonprofits, and Pat Sharkey does a really good job of showcasing their efforts empirically. We're also going to be joined by Efty Sharony, who's the director of Los Angeles Mayor's Office of Reentry, which is, again, another sign of the changes in criminal justice, the fact that we actually have a mayor's office focused on reentry, not reconviction, right? And so that's a sign of changes. Mayor Garcetti's set up this office. She's dedicated her own career to serving those affected by criminal justice system. And we're going to get to hear about some of the great efforts here going on in the city of Los Angeles. And last but not least, we'll be joined by Jeffrey Wallace, who's the president and CEO of Leaders Up. Leaders Up's one of these, a true social innovation kind of incubator. It's trying to prepare men and women with criminal justice involvement to kind of bridge the gap between what employers need and to be frank, the tight labor market in many jobs. And there are plenty of great opportunities for people with criminal justice involvement, but part of it's trying to help them and also the employers understand the right match. And so Jeffrey's going to tell us all about his great work in that space. So without further ado, panel up here and we'll have our discussion. Given that when we talk about criminal justice, we're often talking about kind of depressing topics, I thought it would be useful, if possible, for everyone, and I guess can go kind of in order, if you have a success story that you could talk about, an actual story, preferably about a person or an event where you could see a real success, because I think those kinds of things are the type of things that kind of spread or multiply.
How many do you want?
Give us one, yeah, random sample of one.
Okay, first of all, thank you so much for being here today, and I'm really honored to be on this panel with everyone. I think one of our best success stories might be sitting to my left. But one example is one of the students in our program entered prison with a 3rd grade reading level. He was very active in sports. He received scholarship offers from some great universities, but his SAT scores suffered. He didn't get in. So he shows up in prison with a 3rd grade reading level. He walks out the gate 19 years later as a software engineer and has an internship with a tech company in Silicon Valley. And today he's actually working for The Last Mile, and he's going to be heading up our virtual instruction curriculum. He also mentors youth inside the Ventura Youth Correctional Facility up north, as well as youth in our facility in Pendleton in Indiana, and also at OH Close, which is in Stockton, which we recently opened with Governor Newsom in attendance. And imagine what that feels like. I was with him at the gate when he came out. He hadn't seen his son in 10 years, and there they are reuniting. And to listen to his son's story before Jason came out the gate, he's so proud of his dad. That's one story. The second, and I'll be brief, I promise, is Ali Tambura, who actually works for Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. He works in the criminal justice portal. And he was instrumental in us receiving a grant to open the first women's facility in Oklahoma, a state that has the highest incarcerated rate of women per capita. We opened last month, and Priscilla Chan came to the event, and Ali also spoke there. And I'm so proud of him for his accomplishments, and he's going around the country helping other formerly incarcerated to have the means to start their own enterprises, as well as evangelizing for the whole community. Those are just two of many, many, many.
So yes, I can speak on many success stories, men and women. However, I will talk about myself because I do believe that I am a success story. So very early on, at the age of 12, my brother was shot and killed by the police. And at that moment, I realized that the people that I looked up to, I now feared. So that, I can't show fear in my community or in my household, so that fear turned into anger, false anger. But it was a sense of power. And that just led to a spiral of events that ended up with me being incarcerated for aiding and abetting. And I was incarcerated for 17 years. I paroled in 2015, and I met a guy named Skip Townsend who was running an anger management class in California Institution for Women. And I realized this is what I need. I'm going to go home and I'm going to be a part of Second Call. And I paroled on a Friday and I went to a Second Call meeting on a Monday, and I have been a part of Second Call ever since. I realized the lack at Second Call was women running the organization. So I took that role on. I became the program director at Second Call, and now I go back into CIW, which is the Institution for Women, twice a week. And I want to be the bridge between so many women that have been incarcerated for so long to what is actually going on out here in the community, because a lot has changed. So a lot of expectations are not met, and I like to, bridge that gap.
I think that the success story that comes to mind for me really ties my prior job and where I'm at today. And the story really starts a few blocks from here in the early 90s when we were in a very tough on crime, super predator phase of the state. And there was a young man whose name was Joel Aguilar who was involved in a homicide and ended up receiving a life without parole sentence. And so many of you probably know that we gave a lot of children life without parole sentences here in California. Luckily, that has been reformed by our past governor, but so his story started blocks away from here. And so I met him in, I believe it was 2012, and he was sentenced to die in prison. And we were able to file a case for him, and he was able to be resentenced and eventually parole and come home. And now, in my new position as the director of the Office of Reentry, I was involved in these planning meetings around how we should best spend workforce development money for the population of people coming home from prison. And for me, the biggest success story was when I was running this group, there was a lot of, the usual suspects ahead of, probation, parole, we had the sheriff's department. But for me, what was so exciting is that there were 3 men who were sitting in the room and were able to speak up, and all of them had been considered throwaways. All 3 of them had been sentenced to die in prison and were now home and being a part of the movement and making a decision on what their population and what their community needs.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeffrey Wallace. I'm the president and CEO of Leaders Up, and we're a national talent development accelerator that is employer-led. That has been focusing over the last 5 years on the opportunity youth population, but what we found out is about 1/3 of the young people that we were serving had some criminal justice system exposure. So my success story is going to take a different vantage point, and I'm going to talk about a successful employer that has operationalized fair chance employment practices to ensure that the very individuals that we're talking about today had access to economic opportunity to curb recidivism. There is a man, a social entrepreneur and business leader across the LA County region called Kareem Webb, and he is a leader of a franchise of Buffalo Wild Wings. Kareem worked with Leaders Up to really ensure that he could adapt his talent acquisition practices to ensure that the reentry population had a place to actually earn a living. And I'm happy to report about 2 years later, of the over 30 folks that he hired over the last 2 years, he's retained 28 of those individuals. He's found that these individuals are a lot more productive than the regular individuals he's hired from other access points to talent. He's realized that not just his retention rates are up, but also the ability to really integrate into the workplace culture and add value started with these individuals on day one. So I think it's also important that as we think about how do we curb, recidivism and actually generate more access to opportunity, that we also think about how to push employers to really shift their practices to be more inclusive. And we'll talk more about that later on in the panel, I bet.
So I just want to make a comment for that, because that's spot on. I mean, you could come out the gate with the best skills, but when you start applying for jobs and background checks are done, all of a sudden those skills don't really matter. And so we embarked on a pilot program this year, funded by the Kellogg Foundation and in partnership with Slack Technologies and Free America. And what we all need to collectively do is to change the narrative and to remove the stigma that seems to follow people who have been incarcerated. And what we're doing is changing the culture inside the companies. We're bringing them into our correctional facilities to sit one-on-one, to get to know the people. They're human beings. They're people with talent and skills and desires and families and communities. And the truth of the matter is that 95% of them will be returning home. And when they hear that and they understand that these are future members of their communities, and I ask them, who do you want them to be? They begin to understand more about what's going on. And if you realize that, and everybody here knows what we're talking about, if you look at the media, and what our nation is and society has in their head about who these people are. That's what's making it so difficult. But there are also covenants and rules about certain types of data that can't be accessible by those who have been, criminal justice impacted. And changing the narrative, and if each and every person here goes and helps in their own communities and tells the stories that we're going to share with you today, it will begin to make a difference. And companies are hiring our returned citizen alumni. They're getting a market, well more than a market wage, and they're getting a chance. And once they get into the companies, without a doubt, each and every one has said that they're the most grateful, ambitious, happy employees that they've ever had.
So that's actually a good segue to my next question, which I was going to ask, and we'll skip on that note, but I was going to ask about what are some of the barriers that you see now to successful reentry for people, or just, I didn't even say reentry, just successful rehabilitation for people?
Well, I'll start, and just to pick up where Beverly left off, it's the background check. Let's just be clear. So we did some research about a year ago and released a report called Just Opportunity. And what my research team was able to uncover is that the FBI has reported that 1/3 of the criminal records that they have on file cannot be connected to a conviction or a court case. 1/3 of the data that employers are using to actually assess the risk associated with someone's quote-unquote criminal background. And just to double click on criminal background, that really means that either you are arrested or convicted. And in a country where justice should prevail, I thought we weren't guilty until we're innocent until being convicted, right? So the reality is that the major practice or policy chain across the public and employment sector is around the background check, because it's pinching the pipeline of talent that should have access to these job opportunities. The University of Chicago has done a tremendous amount of research, as John said, that intersects the reduction of violent crime to the access to economic mobility. So the reality is that returning citizens need something to return to. And that return to is usually being able to keep a roof over their head, clothes on their back, food on the table, and provide for their families. The reality is also that the lack of economic opportunity in these same communities that they exited from lacked the economic opportunity necessary to keep them out of the system, so they created their own economic system in order to provide for their families as well. So I think the reality is that there needs to be an overhaul in how we actually are assessing the risks associated with this population. When we talk about the stigmas, let's be clear, we're talking about 70 million Americans. 1 out of every 3. And if we really go up the breadcrumb trail to think about why this is happening, we answered it in the last data inquiry or survey that we took. African Americans are 6 times more likely to be arrested and 5 times more likely to be convicted due to plea bargains. So at the end of the day, there is also this inherent systemic racism that is actually fueling the criminal justice system, that is allowing us to continue to penalize and marginalize a segment of the population that has historically been shut out from fully participating in the economy. If we think about just the bedrock of how America was actually established with the advent of slavery. So at the end of the day, what we really should be talking about is the access to economic opportunity, the supports to education, so you can develop the skills to really compete in a thriving global economy.
So I will speak on something a step further. I realized that even if I didn't have to check a box that stated I was incarcerated, I already had a wall of rejection. So I already built up a wall that was going to prevent me from, let's say, applying to be a program director. So let me go to Chick-fil-A because I feel like that is my worth. So the barrier can be self, outside of checking the box, and how do I present myself in an interview? How do I speak and answer that difficult question of where I've been or my history of where I've been the past 17 years? That was all myself, and I had to work on myself, and the women and men have to get that self-esteem and that self-confidence to where they can successfully and have a healthy mind to get back into that community. So a lot of times I think the barrier can be self, and that is the first barrier that I would like to work with men and women, so when they get to that, then they are able to tackle that next step, because that is an issue, but I gotta conquer my issues first.
I would like to, unless you want to go first, but something just to consider is that there are companies like Checker. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Checker, but they do background checks for companies. It's a startup in San Francisco. But they also have an initiative called Bounce Back. And I know this because we created their website for them inside San Quentin. And they help with record expungement. And there are lots of tools, and maybe you might be able to speak to that, that can actually help people remove the stigma themselves. So that's a very positive recent development.
So when the Mayor's Office of Reentry was first formed in 2015, they polled, the population, and they found that employment was the biggest barrier. And after that, our city council passed the first fair chance hiring ordinance, which was ban the box, which then later expanded on into the state. And while we're trying to work on the implementation and figure out how to fix some of the problems that are happening in it, in the meantime, we've developed programs around employment. And we have a partnership with Caltrans that gives people an opportunity to start working right away, because we know that sometimes, although we want people to get a lot of other services or do some other things, they need a paycheck to be able to pay the bills. And so we have one program called Inroads, and within that program, as it was running, the prior director noticed that sometimes a job is not enough and that they need more supports. And so we were able, with Prop 47 money, to start Project Impact. And I think that the beauty of the project is really that we have employment services, but there's also behavioral health services and civil legal services, which means they're able to help with expungements, they're able to help with people restoring their licenses. Sometimes people lose their nursing license or different licenses like that in order to get help to move forward. There's also, they can help with child support and housing issues as well. And so having that is really a holistic approach to to employment services. And to me, the real heart and soul of Project Impact is that we have a peer navigator. And the peer navigator is somebody with lived experience who has been able to succeed, and they really help empower people, like what you were talking about, like recognize that they have a role and that they really should be part of this community and really welcome them home and be able to talk to them in, you know, I don't know how else to say it, in a language, in a culture that they will understand as to why these services and this help is necessary and deserved.
That's great. So one of the challenges often that I'm sure a number of you can speak to, right, with any program, even when it's successful, is, you know, bringing it to a scale, you know, that can have what, you know, epidemiologists would call population level effects. And what do you think, what are some of your thoughts on, you know, ways to spur, the growth of successful programs so that they can actually be done at a scale? I'm sure that you all have more work than you possibly can handle on your own, right? So other people have to imitate, and, you know, the innovations have to, diffuse into other programs and other places. So what are some of your thoughts on, you know, how we can bring programs that are successful to scale?
Do you want me to start?
Sure, Beverly.
So I think we talked about this earlier today, and collaboration is the key. We're scaling as quickly as we can in opening classrooms inside correctional facilities. We're in 4 states. We are equally represented between men's and women's correctional facilities, and we have 3 youth facilities now. We're filling the pipeline, and at some point, we're going to have a critical mass of those who are coming home. I'm not a housing expert. I can't help them get housing, but I want to partner with the best in each state and in each area for housing. Same thing with a bridge to the employment community and any kind of social services they might need. But our mission is to provide skills that will lead to jobs, and they do. So by collaborating with the best of LA to help the women coming out of CIW and some of our other facilities, and those in Indiana and Kansas and Oklahoma will enable us to scale. Our goal is 50 classrooms in 5 years, and we're already in 15, and we're well on our way. So anybody in housing in LA who wants to collaborate, please.
Yeah.
I think the short answer is funding. I believe that Second Call, as well as a lot of other nonprofits, only go so far because of the lack of funding. And then when we are blessed with a contract of a bigger organization or collaborate, then we have to wait for the money to trickle in down to us. So we're working for couple of months before we get that. So our staff can't grow because I can only guarantee somebody maybe 6 months of pay at a time. I don't know too many people who want to work for 6 months only, and then what do I do after that 6 months? So that is one very major issue.
I would agree with what you're saying. I think the public partnership is obviously very necessary, but even though I'm sitting in my government hat, I believe that we need to take the money from the government and give it to the communities, right? Because CBOs are the ones who are working with a community, and they're from the community, and they're the ones that know the real needs. And so I believe that by working together in partnership, because you can't have the community-based organizations need the system buy-in, and they need their support so that we can go into the jails and so that we can go into the prisons and start working with people beforehand. But I think really honoring and respecting where expertise lays is a really important factor.
Well, I think each of the programs and initiatives represented on this panel actually demonstrate a proven model that should actually inform policy. So how do we ensure that all correctional facilities across the nation offer the type of skills development that Beverly and her team is doing? Or how do we ensure that in correctional facilities, the type of mental health services and self-actualization services, the really rehabilitation efforts are actually scaled across these systems, or even the point of navigation? There are promising practices that have evidence that they should be scaled. So we have to move them from just programmatic implementation, because to be clear, people in poverty who don't have access access and influence get programs, but people of influence actually inform policy so they can make these issues not be exceptions to the rule, but actually the new norm. I think it's important, and that's what the beauty of this, Social Innovation Summit is about, is how can we leverage what we're innovating on the peripheral and actually inform policy at the core of how communities and governments actually operate. And then when you flip the script and think about the private sector, if we can demonstrate to employers firm by firm in geographies that fair chance practices are actually successful and impact the bottom line, then our challenge that leaders up to our employers are, well, let's scale this practice enterprise-wide. So if you have found that in Los Angeles that fair chance practices are actually adding value to your business and impacting the community in a transformative way, then let's scale this across the country. So I think we also have to, and as practitioners, we always have our heads in the weeds, ensuring that our programs are as best as possible and is making the impact, but also what we are actually generating is applied research to yield evidence, to inform policy, so that we can ensure that we're actually shifting a lot of the systemic issues that are causing a lot of the effects that we're seeing in our community today.
So you stole my next question, but which I was going to ask about.
That's me and Beverly Steen.
That's good. But I was going to ask about, the ability to convince policymakers that that there's a cost savings social cost savings to investing in rehabilitation, reentry programs, and what kind of opportunities you see out there for convincing legislators that this is a worthwhile investment. So that, as you mentioned, how do we convince legislatures that, I think if you look at most correctional budgets, it's like less than 5% goes to programs in the institutions. How does it get to be 20%? What are the what's the necessary change, when we think about, what we fund in the community, what we fund inside of institutions? How do we get policymakers to see this as a cost savings?
So I think it's results. And, we talked briefly, or we talked in depth actually this morning about data and how important it is to have data. Well, what if you're a nonprofit and you haven't accumulated enough time and data yet? How can you do that? And whoever mentioned it, and I'm sorry for forgetting, it's maybe it was David actually, it's storytelling, and it's success stories from your organization. When we first started in San Quentin, we treated it just like it was a startup, because I and my co-founder husband, Chris Redlitz, come from technology backgrounds. So we said, okay, this is a startup, let's prove the results. And we had our very first demo day, which is where from our entrepreneurship program, the students come in, they present their business ideas and their business plans to an audience of invited guests from the community as well as from the San Quentin Men in Blue. CNN covered it. Wall Street Journal was there, Forbes, and we had so much media coverage just from that very first cohort of 5 men that the inbound as a result of that was just incredible. We were so thrilled. So we had 4 cohorts of entrepreneurship, and we realized that that would be a tough scale, because 2 years, 2 nights a week, he and I, Chris Redlitz, my husband and co-founder, taught the program ourselves inside San Quentin. And we were so pleased with the results, but how do we scale it? So we said, okay, let's figure out where the jobs are. It was predicted then by 2020 there would be a shortage of 1 million software engineers in our country. Okay, we're going to teach software engineering, computer coding. Guess what? No internet access. Okay, we're going to figure that out too. And to this day, every classroom, everything we do, no internet access. So getting back to your original question, success stories, then data, then policy change. And we're seeing a shift. We really are.
My answer is actually the same as success stories and data. We invite a lot of policymakers to our class on Thursday night, and so they can see for themselves, because I can say it, I can talk about it, it's about second call till I am blue in the face. But when somebody goes to a Thursday night on 35th and Normandy and is welcome. There's about 40 to 50 on average every Thursday night of mainly men, a few women. Out of that number, there's about 20-ish union electricians, a few carpenters, a few painters. So these all union careers, and the rest of them are coming to figure out, how can I get a part of that 25? And as we go around and ask, how are you? Who are you? And I hear the numbers of, you know, my name is Charles. I've been down 25 years, 26 years. The numbers range from 1 year to a guy that's been incarcerated for 32. But now they have all are now in the community, rebuilding it, the same community that they destroyed back in the early 80s and 90s. So that is one way that they can see that this actually works.
So off of what you're saying, I think that the answer is proximity. And I'd like to take credit for that, but I have to give credit where it's deserved. And Brian Stevenson, who, if any of you have never seen him speak, you should look him up. He's amazing. If I had to choose a prophet in life, it would definitely be him. But Brian Stevenson talks about proximity. And I truly believe that that is the answer, because I know the time that I've spent in prisons and in jails and in juvenile halls, the people I have met are phenomenal and have built lives, and they're role models because they have persevered the most difficult circumstances and are able to come out as whole and inspirational people. And I'm encouraged that our new-ish governor spent his first week and he went into the GJJ youth facility. And I really believe that that's where it lays, is bringing people together and people listening and looking at each other and realizing that we're all the same and we all feel the same pain.
I agree with everything my fellow panelists have said, and I think the only additional thing I would say is show them the money. We're talking about an $87 billion issue. America is leaving $87 billion on the table from our economy, but not ensuring these individuals are working. Around the corner in South LA, the youth unemployment rate is 40% higher than the federal rate right now. And our mayor is leaving $550 million on the table of the Los Angeles economy by not ensuring every young person around the corner has access to a job. So when we think about this from an economic perspective, that's what's really criminal, is that we're really not allowing individuals to have the support and the access to opportunity and the access to skills development to maximize their potential. What we're really doing is creating a broader chasm of the haves and the have-nots based upon proximity, based upon access to the essential human development elements like education, like access to healthcare, access to knowledge. And those are the things that are actually pushing more people into the system and creating this deficit model as well. So I also think that we have to, especially with politicians and elected officials, is demonstrate to them the cost-benefit analysis of ensuring that people are put back to work when they're actually reentering the community as well.
So another question I had was about, the role of nonprofits, and often there's complaints about government programs having difficulty with innovation and being flexible. And I was just curious about your perspective on some of the advantages to groups that are innovating and the nonprofit side to try to do the work that you're doing, and what kind of advantage you see from the perspective of a nonprofit engaged in social innovation with justice-involved individuals.
So I'd like to say that I'm pretty excited about the fact that the governments that I'm working with are being innovative right by our side. And I think that, again, it goes back to results. And when they understand that by investing in programs that will lead to jobs for those who are incarcerated in their states, they get excited. And they want more, and they want to help, because as we just mentioned, the cost of incarceration and then recidivism is really pulling on their budgets and taking away from areas like education. So I see a shift, I really do, and especially in the states in which we work. And we opened in Indiana, for example, because the governor called us and said, I saw the last mile and I want Hoosiers to have that opportunity. And it's part of his next level jobs initiative. He mentioned us in his State of the State just recently, and he's winning a Trailblazer Award for what he's doing. Governor Stitt in Oklahoma, Kevin Stitt, just newly elected. First time in 30 years, a governor in office came inside a correctional facility, was for the opening of our program with CZI in Oklahoma. Governor Newsom was with us at the opening of our youth facility in Stockton just a few weeks ago. And it was there that he announced that we want to take the youth facilities out of the Department of Corrections and put them under Health and Human Services, because that's what we need to do to help the youth who are troubled. And so I may not have answered your question exactly, but I do really feel that the governors are reaching out to us and saying, we want the last mile. We want our citizens to have a chance to have, 21st century job skills.
I would like to know if you can ask the question again.
Oh, yeah. So do you see any advantages for services being provided from the nonprofit side of things as opposed to, a program that would maybe historically been run strictly out of a government agency? So is there any advantages you see from, other than being in a nonprofit, but in just terms of innovation, flexibility, things that you've seen, experienced? Yeah.
Yes. Well, one of the advantages of a nonprofit is its second call can eliminate all excuses. Someone cannot come to us and say, I can't do this, it's hard for me to do this, because we are all living, breathing, walking examples of how it can be done. So that is one very good example, and why I love working with a nonprofit, because I can sit with the young lady or the young man in front of me, and when they have those doubts, I can at least help eliminate a process of dropping those doubts.
I think the same thing is, I think systems, it might be, I'm happy that we're having a shift and that CDCR is embracing rehabilitation, and that, our local county is embracing it as well. But I think that, for people who are incarcerated and have intergenerational trauma from law enforcement and these agencies, I think it's hard to task that agency with rehabilitation. And so I'm a really big believer in us funding the community to come in and help connect with them in a real way, so that there's just a level of trust and rapport that's just naturally there as well.
Yeah, in LA County, to your point, we are starting to dismantle the juvenile justice system as it exists right now. And the funding from that process alone could transform the lives of a tremendous amount of young people. Just to dimensionalize that, if you guys haven't realized already, I'm a data geek. So at the end of the day, when we look at LA County and its incarceration of 1,400 young people, right? That's $350 million to incarcerate 1,400 young people. And if you just dimensionalize that, like from a standpoint of a USC degree, we're talking about giving 34,000 people full ride scholarships to 4-year degrees. So you're absolutely right that we really need to be looking at how that we're appropriating these funds in a way to actually drive the change around the systemic issues that these communities are facing.
So another question I had, and this actually relates to some of the work I've done with the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society and their land care program. One of the challenges they face is not scaling it in the city, but when other people come and they want to do it in their backyard. And so I'm curious to what extent have you thought about, how can successful programs be franchised, if you will, replicated elsewhere, maybe not just in your own group, but are there models out there where we think people who want to try this say, a different, something similar in Alaska or a place that you can't be, that it can be replicated?
So replication is difficult because you have to build trust, and trust happens over time. And that's my short answer because we only have 2 minutes, so go ahead.
I will say the same, which is time. We were going to Atlanta to replicate Second Call, and it takes a lot of time. And then to teach and, get the curriculum and the steps behind it, it takes time, which a lot of people don't have.
I guess my quick answer would, I'm sure you'll have a good data answer. I'm not a data person. That will be like data, so it can be duplicated, and then relationships, because real transformation and change only happens with relationships. So that's what. True.
Well, it's interesting. I don't have a data response to this question, but one of the things that we're doing at Leaders Up is we've been quite successful around preparing folks for employment. We've generated an 82% interview to hire ratio for the individuals that we've trained. So what we're doing now is leveraging technology to enable scale. So we're taking our curriculum and putting it on an app so that we can translate that type of career readiness capacity across systems like community colleges, reentry system, et cetera. So I also think that we can leverage technology, as we heard even with Dave in the fireside chat, to really take the promises, practices, and scale those in a way. It's not the silver bullet, but at the end of the day, what we do wish that there would be some fidelity to execution around core principles and models that prove that yield the results that we want to see.
Hi, my name is Alexa Russo. For those of you this morning who are here, sorry, I'm talking again. But my question is, and I'm from Homeboy Industries, so I have questions, I have comments. But the first thing was, Father Greg has taken back that statement that nothing stops a bullet like a job. He's taking it off the t-shirts and he's saying, you know what, we've realized that a educated felon can reoffend, that a sober felon can reoffend, and an employed felon can reoffend, but a healed felon will not reoffend. So I just wanted to say that. So, coming at it from a healing standpoint, and also from capacity of the people that have been coming through for the past 30 years, there is a global homeboy network with 250 organizations who have joined to educate, not incarcerate, to work together with a symposium at the endowment, and everybody's invited, and you don't have to be like, we want to do it the homeboy way, but it's just we want to do it in a compassionate way where we don't demonize. But then my other question was Prop 87, where's that money? Because I don't know if the nonprofits have gotten that yet. So that's a question. Second question was, it was burning. It was burning. Let me get it. Oh yeah. So you mentioned how innovative agencies sometimes have a hard time working and getting government grants. Yeah. So at Homeboy we finally got a grant. I think it was $1 or $2 million, and we had to give it back because they told us after the grant was approved that we couldn't have formerly incarcerated people teaching our clients. I mean, that's what works. That's the mentorship, that's the navigation. So I'm getting fired up, so I'm gonna stop. But, there is a lot of great work being done, and I don't know what to do. Like, I'm gonna stand on the chair and be like, can we all talk to each other? Because I'm listening and I'm like, well, there's stuff going that I know about from my agency, but I'm sure you all have agencies where there's stuff going on too. So where is that space that we can share and go after the money together and make the changes so our populations are served by the best people possible and their transformations and, I won't even get into the job training and workforce can actually happen. So does it happen from the nonprofits to inform the government or what? That's my question.
Okay, so I just really, some of the RFP process for government grants and funding is such a laborious thing. I don't think the nonprofits have enough money and resources to even answer the RFPs and some of those applications. The good news is that there are a lot of philanthropic organizations. There are big corporates. Google.org is a tremendous organization to work with, and on and on. And I mentioned Kellogg and, of course, Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. But just recently, I was asked by a startup, nonprofit, to join together, and we're collectively applying for grants. So it's, again, this collaboration, because we each bring something to the table. So maybe looking at, who do you align with, who do you trust, whose mission is aligned with yours and core values, and then what is the purpose of the grant? I mean, part of the challenge is having the research or be able to find all of them, but the climate is changing. Go ahead.
But I just want to say that Homeboy's got an almost $20 million budget, and it was about 5% of it is government. So we literally, like anybody who does give money to public safety and rehabilitation, like we're going after it. But I think my question was really more about, why. I'm so glad. I mean, I've sat with your predecessor at Office of Reentry for employment equity for those meetings. And, it's like 40 years ago, Mayor Bradley did have an Office of Reentry. But why did it take another 40 years for this to start? And, we're behind on these things. So I think what I'm asking is more about pushing policy and changes rather than the funding. Because the funder, you're right, there's so many amazing funders. But what do you guys think the catalyst is going to actually make this change? Because there are numbers, there's collaboration, there's success.
One thing I'd say is on the applying for government grants, I agree, because even at universities we end up hiring, effectively grant writers to just help fill out the forms, and part of that. This gets more into the public administration side of things, but we probably actually need to think about rewriting the rules on how we issue grants and contracts, because I'll say there's some times where I've literally just passed on grants because it was like, yeah, there's no way we're doing that. I'd rather just go ask a foundation for less money and not have to deal with all the paperwork. Yeah.
Philanthropic dollars are not going to be there forever.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, philanthropic dollars are really like social justice research and development funds to prove what should happen at the policy level again. So I think, to your point, given the expansiveness of Homeboy Industries Network, the question I have is, why has Homeboy Industries or other organizations like ours not been holding our elected officials accountable at the state level, at the federal level, and even at the local level to actually start to ensure that the administrative burden, placed on accessing these public dollars is lightened? Now, I know it's a delicate dance because these are actually public dollars that we need to ensure are regulated and managed in a way with transparency. But let's be clear, at the end of the day, a lot of the communities that are represented on the other side of the opportunity divide, they don't have access to the tax dollars that they're actually paying into fund all of this government activity. So I think that we need to organize, I think that we need to advocate, and most importantly, beyond getting folks elected, we need to hold them accountable to our agendas. And I think that's the big thing around community organizing is we do a lot around electing folks, but at the end of the day, we have to step to them with an agenda and hold them accountable to it as well.
I'm here at USC with the Initiative on Homelessness, and I've been interested in following the fact that here in California, when people come out, they're not eligible for a lot of types of careers based on the criteria. They can't get licensed for various things. Even the firefighters that work in the prison, when they come out, they can't get the EMT licenses. And there's been some effort to try to work on that, but I'm curious what ways that your organizations might be able to contribute to that process, because if we want to see people get jobs that in order to move up and give back, they have to be able to access some of the areas where there's professional jobs with licenses that can actually help them to grow and access some of the dollars that are out there.
I'll take that one on. Leaders Up in the Bay Area's built a collective impact strategy called the Bay Area Young Men of Color Employment Partnership. And to Beverly's point, it's about collaboration. That partnership takes our direct service model, integrates it with a business council that oversees the regional economy in the business with some of the largest companies, the Bay Area Council. But we also partner with PolicyLink. And PolicyLink is doing an extremely fantastic job of organizing community-based organizations and agencies across the state through what we call the Alliance for Boys, the California Alliance for Boys and Men of Color, and we're advocating for those very policies at the state level so that folks that are reentering have access to these occupational licenses. Because again, I think it's criminal that we can put folks who are incarcerated at the front lines of these forest fires, but they cannot come out and become a firefighter because people are now concerned that they're going to burglarize their homes. If they were going to burglarize your home, they would have burglarized it when they were there incarcerated fighting the forest fire. So I think we also need to ensure that we are holding, again, our elected officials accountable for some of these policies that were put in place to do exactly what they're doing right now, which is further marginalize people from opportunity.
So I have seen a lot of vocational training programs inside the California facilities in which we have our program. And they are run by CalPIA, Prison Industry Authority. They are making inroads. There are trades that one can qualify for and work in and actually achieve a license, and when they are released from prison, their first year of union dues is paid by CalPIA. So it's mostly in the construction trades, but they do deep sea scuba diving in one of the facilities. They're learning Autocad and, of course, software engineering and computer coding. In Oklahoma, I was really impressed with a program inside the women's facility where they're actually teaching the women to become estheticians and beauticians. And the program is run by a woman who was formerly a resident of Mabel Bassett Correctional Facility. She was incarcerated there. And she went out into the community and she just evangelized to get the law changed. And today, the formerly incarcerated women who are coming home in Oklahoma can become beauticians and can become whatever they want to do in the health and beauty field. So it does take a champion to go forth and change the rules and change the law. But then she comes back inside and does the training. I mean, that's extraordinary.
Good afternoon. My name is Delphine. I'm in Bank of the West. I have a statement and then a question. A short statement is that I agree with what you said. There's no way that foundations can ever replace the amount of resources government have. You should not have to give back $1 million, $2 million. That's a policy issue that what he says taking place with PolicyLink, who I'm very familiar with, what needs to happen at the local level, because it's ridiculous. It's no way that a foundation can do it. My question is for Shanae. You talked about the lack of self-esteem that you have and others when they come through this process. I see that across every discipline. What have you done in your organization, and what are some recommendations to get folks to believe again, despite the enormous amount, of obstacles they have to overcome? Because I see it in housing. People self-select themselves out of a lot of things. So what have you done, and what are some of the things you recommend can help in that aspect?
Well, Second Call is known for their trauma-informed classes. So even in the pre-apprenticeships that are throughout Los Angeles, Pasadena, Fontana, and now in Locke High School, we go in and facilitate these trauma-informed classes and take them through a process. Because she said it's, I'm sorry, I didn't catch her name, but the one that's from Homeboy Industry, it was very true that the healed are the ones that are not going back to prison. So that is the focus. I do not want to focus on how to tie a tie and how great the resume may be or how good the dress may look. I want to work from within. So we go throughout different places, Skip and myself, and facilitate this curriculum that takes the person through unresolved trauma. The very first day is, where are you from? And that's not what street you're from, what block you're from, but what do you remember seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, and feeling when you grew up? Those memories bring up so much. And that takes us to the end of letting go, healing, forgiveness, because if I'm still angry at my mom from 12, that's gonna carry on with me till I'm 40. So we are actively in high schools, we were actively in communities working through this process, and all of our classes are free. So everyone is welcome, not just the men and women that have been re-entered into society, but families as well. Because it's very easy to come home and I have been healed, but now I'm trying to function in dysfunction. My family is still dysfunctional. So I want to bring everyone in as a whole to move the process forward.
Hi, I'm Marguerite from the Youth Policy Institute, where we run a coding boot camp and are very happy to partner with Last Mile and helping people to get jobs when they're here. My question kind of goes around that social confidence, is the social capital. How do we help build social capital? We're really trying to explore, how do I open up access? How do I provide opportunity that's meaningful for the people who are coming back and in a way that makes sense for them? So how do I build social capital for the people I serve?
So one of the ways we've been successful with our programs, especially in San Quentin, and it's our largest program and it's been operating for 4 years, is we have a very robust volunteer and mentorship program. And we go out into the business community and we invite mentors, especially software engineers, to come inside and sit side by side with students and help them assess their projects, assess their codes, and get to know them. And I will say that there are a number of returned citizens who are getting job placements inside the companies of those mentors and volunteers. So maybe creating a community-based volunteer and mentorship program would be helpful.
Jeffrey, do you have any finishing thoughts on building social networks and capital based on the work you're doing?
We just got to influence power. Let's be clear what social capital is all about. It's a construct that we have in the society that allows folks to choose what other folks can and cannot do. So back to the point of the power of storytelling and being able to tell compelling stories, to shift the mindsets and inform individuals that they do need to be highly inclusive in order to be competitive. They do need to be highly inclusive for us to really ensure that folks have the supports necessary to maximize their potential. But I think we always have to tell stories and lift up imagery that will help folks start to deconstruct the biases that they have, because at the end of the day, you give a young person from around the corner at South LA an opportunity and they are running through walls. And I know I'm familiar with the work at Youth Policy Institute across the city and the Promise Zones, and we all represent these communities that have been historically marginalized. So I think it's about really ensuring that through mentorship, volunteership, but also addressing power structures around the biases that are holding people back from accessing opportunity is critical as well.
Thank you all for a robust panel, and we're at our end here, so all right.
Well, it's been a really powerful day, the last panel. Again, I get the opportunity every time to share some of my personal reflections. I think in each case, each person that was up here really had some really powerful contributions. I really appreciate Shanae telling her story, telling us, in some sense, modeling a pathway forward that has been forged in her own life. I appreciate what Jeffrey said in terms of the kind of diffusion strategies we need to engage in order to not only change policy, but change culture, to change mindset. I appreciate the work of Efty and her comment about proximity, which can help us move from a concept of them into a concept of us as we're thinking about what it takes for communities to thrive. And I certainly appreciate, I'm blanking, Beverly, sorry, from that moment. And the work as a social entrepreneur to create a set of evidence-based practices that can be applied, and then how we can work together to make sure that these necessary next steps happen. But I appreciate everyone here who brought your intensity to the conversation today. And knowing that that intensity is what's going to lead to the kind of changes we all seek to see in our communities. So that people, no matter where they come from, regardless of zip code, have an opportunity to thrive. I have one more poll for you before we celebrate together what we've learned up at a reception upstairs so we can enjoy the weather a little bit. In this poll, I was curious, based on what you've heard today, what is the one word that you would now use to define opportunity? Is it something different? Is it the same? As you're putting that word down, we will share the word cloud from this morning. We'll share the word cloud from this afternoon. I know that as a data geek myself, we don't have the same people necessarily who are filling it out in the morning and the afternoon, so it's not a perfect measure of learning, if you will. However, it is it's a couple of really critical snapshots for us. So again, thank you for joining us today and for being part of forging pathways to opportunity.